We've we'll hear the presentation from Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker on the proposals of the Commission. We've heard from him, and today we're going to be hearing the President of the European Council in this hemicycle that seeks to continue to be the place of debate on the future of the European Union. And that is why at the last meeting of the European Council, I invited the heads of state and government to take part in meetings in this Parliament with the representatives of European citizens. However, at a time in which in Europe we are seeing very delicate matters taking place that we do not accept, I'd like to remind everyone that we cannot continue to talk about the future of our Union and the future of the Eurozone, the future of our institutions and the future of our citizens if we do not have the strength and desire to defend the founding values of our Union. We are together. We are part of a community, and that means sharing values. And we have to continually recall that. And today we have to roundly condemn what happened in Rome, in Italy, where a group of hooligans has used the image of Anna and Frank to offend fans from a different club. Using the picture of Anne Frank as a form of insult is something very serious. Everyone in our Union has the right to profess their own religion. The Jewish community is part of our European Union. I am proud to have fellow European citizens of the Jewish faith, and I think that anti-Semitism should just be the preserve of a terrible experience of our past, a terrible chapter of the last century that is over now. Having said that, I'll now give the floor to Donald Tusk, President of the Council.
Thank you very much, President Tajani, members of the European Parliament. As you know, I am obsessed by unity. This obsession was with me during last European Council, but in fact it has been with me since the first days of my work in Brussels. This is why I rejected the idea of removing Greece from the Eurozone in 2015. And this is also why I pursued a common position of the EU vis-à-vis Russia during the conflict in Ukraine. For many months, I was building agreement among the 27 in order to give Prime Minister Cameron arguments to stay in the EU, even though this meant that each of the 27 had to make a sacrifice. Unfortunately, this was not enough for the Brits. After Brexit, I worked towards creating unity of the 27 in the negotiations with the United Kingdom. We have shown, also during last European Council, that no one can divide the 27 in these negotiations. Striving for unity is also the main reason for creating the leaders' agenda. Last Friday, all the leaders agreed that the priority for them is unity among 27. This was voiced in unison. On this most important issue to me, we reached full understanding right from the start. The leaders' agenda invalidated a dangerous assumption that together we can only stand still and that we can only move forward when we divide. It is about reconciling dynamism and unity, about being ambitious and staying together at the same time. This, of course, does not rule out enhanced cooperation as the last resort, open to all and in accordance with the treaties. My intention is to build on what connects, not on what divides. But it doesn't mean that we shouldn't stand up with courage to the issues that are or could be divisive, so that we can find common solutions to them. I will just mention migration, the EMU and Brexit. When it comes to the migration crisis, I appealed from the very beginning to build Europe's response on what connects us, on the protection of our external borders. I did so being aware that there are also ideas that put member states in a permanent conflict. One such question is relocation, precisely speaking, the mandatory quotas. On this issue, consensus is as unlikely today as it was many months ago. But I do see a real chance of full agreement by June on matters like protecting external borders, decisive support for frontline countries, that is Italy, Greece, Spain, Bulgaria, strategy vis-à-vis Africa and adequate support for international organizations helping refugees and migrants, UNHCR, IOM and World Food Programme, European management over return and readmission policy, as well as most of the elements of the Dublin reform. If on these matters we are really effective, we will be close to a lasting solution to the migration crisis. As regards EMU reform, following the publication of the 5 Presidents' report, no one should have any doubts what we need to do. Everything is crystal clear. The problem is member states' conflicting interests. One of the first effects of the leaders' agenda is the agreement to find potential solutions in the nearest possible future despite these differences. I will do everything in my power to take the first very concrete steps by June towards establishing the European Monetary Fund and strengthening the stability of the banking union. I still believe that it is possible. In June, it will become clear if I am an incurable optimist. But one thing I can promise you today. If we don't reach agreement by June, I will say precisely why it wasn't possible and who is responsible. As for the Brexit negotiations, we have managed to build and maintain unity among the 27. But ahead of us is still the toughest stress test. If we fail it, the negotiations will end in our defeat. We must keep our unity regardless of the direction of the talks. The EU will be able to rise to every scenario as long as we are not divided. It is in fact up to London how this will end, with a good deal, no deal, or no Brexit. But in each of these scenarios, we will protect our common interest only by being together. We continue to look for the best way towards a Europe that is united, solidary and sovereign. Our quest must be accompanied by a constant and profound reflection on the essence of our community. I would like to say a few words on 3 of its dimensions. First of all, we are a territorial community, which means that we have a common territory and common external borders. Our duty is to protect them. The migration crisis has made us aware with full force of the need to rebuild effective control of our external borders, while the aggressive behaviour of certain third countries and the destabilisation around Europe has made us aware of the need to defend our territory. For this reason, we want to launch permanent structured cooperation on defence so-called PESCO, by the end of this year. In order to protect our external borders, we must build a model of durable and efficient financing on a bigger scale than ever before. It should become a part of our discussion on the future MFF. Secondly, we are a cultural community, which doesn't mean that we are better or worse. We are simply different from the outside world. Our openness and tolerance cannot mean walking away from protecting our heritage. We have the right and obligation to care for what distinguishes us from other cultures, not in order to be against someone, but to be ourselves, without a feeling of superiority, but with a feeling of justified pride. I remember a great hashtag by one of your leaders which said, "I am European and I am proud." This is why the first point on the leaders' agenda for our meeting in Gothenburg in November is culture and education. Thirdly, we are a political community. It is high time we renewed our vows in the name of our political values enshrined in Article 2 of the Treaty of the European Union. Let me quote, "The Union is founded on the values of respect for human dignity, freedom, democracy, equality, the rule of law, and respect for human rights, including the rights of persons belonging to minorities. These values are common to the Member States in a society in which pluralism, non-discrimination, tolerance, justice, solidarity and equality between women and men prevail." I would like to remind all those in power, all the Member States, that by signing the treaty, you have also signed this article. So either you respect it, or you clearly say you reject it, with all the consequences of this fact. Finally, I would like to refer to an issue it would be hard to avoid, being here in Strasbourg, namely the future composition of the European Parliament. For this topic, I have planned a special European Council in February next year. As you know, we must deal with this matter because of Brexit, as well as the changing demography. I take all the proposals seriously that have surfaced in this debate. They are all interesting and pro-European ideas. I personally believe that the most natural solution would be to adopt a simple rule: fewer countries, fewer mandates. It is not only pragmatic and logical, but also what is expected by the public opinion. Of course, such a solution in no way invalidates the idea of transnational lists. I am aware that this will be our common decision, since the Parliament will be proposing and co-deciding on this matter. This is why I would like you to take such a possibility into account. Dear friends, when I was here in March this year, you may remember that I recalled a proverb: if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Today I feel we have a real chance to go together, far and faster. Thank you.
Thank you, President. And I now give the floor to President of the European Commission, Jean-Claude Juncker.
Monsieur le
President of the European Council, members of the European Parliament, I will be brief because, apart from just a few minor nuances, I entirely agree with the remarks made by President Tusk, and I do not need to paraphrase what is just said because I entirely agree. First of all, I would like to recall the principle of solidarity and the tragedy that Spain and Portugal have just experienced, the terrible fires. We've all been shocked by that. The same applied for torrential rainfall that struck the 3 Baltic countries a few months ago. Solidarity is the driving value of our union, and if anyone is facing trouble, then it is essential and necessary for the European Union to come and help those who are suffering. And that is why I asked Commissioner Stylianides to give the matter some thought as to how to change our civil protection mechanisms, which are not working properly. It isn't normal if a fire breaks out on a Sunday morning in Portugal that we have to wait until Wednesday evening before the first European airplane arrives to give assistance. So we have to speed up that process. We will verify the mechanisms that apply within the European Solidarity Fund for Portugal, Spain and the 3 Baltic countries and make sure they are properly implemented. I do not need to dwell on the proposals made by the Commission in terms of migration policy and the digital agenda. All the proposals tabled by the Commission are being looked at within the Council and the Parliament, and I would like us to speed up our work, particularly when it comes to the common asylum procedure. We've been wasting a lot of time, and it is now urgent for us to agree on all these proposals. I would like to pay tribute to the LIBE committee within your Parliament that a week ago took very wise decisions, and I'd like to congratulate you for that. We've talked a lot about Africa, and I regularly invite the members of the Council, in other words the Member States, to now turn their words into action. We have set up an emergency trust fund for Africa with 1.8 billion euros available, with the hope, and today I have to say that was naive, that the Member States should make exactly the same efforts. They haven't done that, which has meant that the Commission had to increase its contribution to 2.9 billion to be financed from the European budget. Up to now, Member States have made major efforts to contribute 175 million euros to that fund. That is absolutely outrageous. To talk about Africa showing crocodile tears and not to do anything is absolutely unacceptable. As far as the digital agenda is concerned, the Commission has tabled 43 initiatives, 24 of which legislative, 24 which have been adopted by the Commission, but up to now the Council and the Parliament have only adopted 6 directives. That is not particularly impressive. Everyone is talking about the digital agenda, so we now have to make sure we actually make progress. The same applies to broadband and fixed networks. For 5G, we have to speed up our work to ensure that by 2020 we have electronic radio broadband made available to the operators, and that decision needs to be made as quickly as possible. We've also talked about trade policy, in particular at the behest of President Macron. I reminded the European Council that the Commission continues to hold the view that it is essential to conclude trade agreements with the Mercosur countries as soon as possible. It is a huge economic bloc, and it will be the most important trade agreement concluded by the EU. However, we insist on the need to have reciprocity mechanisms put in place, which will demonstrate to Europeans and to others watching us that Europe is open, but it is not up for grabs. And we therefore have to insist on the fact that we need reciprocal measures to be put into place. President, ladies and gentlemen, in a few weeks we will be meeting in Gothenburg to discuss essentially social policy. In November 2017, we will finally be doing something that was planned in November 1997. That is when the first employment summit of the EU took place. I am probably the only one who remembers it because I was in the chair. In the conclusions, it states that a special summit will be held once a year dealing with employment issues. It's now taking place in 2017, 20 years down the line. Now, I can just express the fact that I'm astonished that nothing is happening here, but the social dimension of Europe must not remain pious words, but must now be fleshed out with content. So with that in mind, I am pleased, satisfied, almost happy that yesterday in the Council we were able to agree on the Posted Workers Directive. Of course, not everything is perfect. However, the fact that we were able to achieve a compromise, also with the help and pressure put to bear by the European Parliament, we are now in a position that we've achieved progress, and I believe that's worthy of recognition. Yesterday, the ministers were able to agree, and I believe that is very good news.
In
terms of economic and monetary union, on the 6th of December, the European Commission is going to be tabling its proposals. We will discuss the Commission proposals here in this House in preparation for the December summit. Today, the Commission is adopting its work programme for next year. The work programme should ensure that Europe becomes stronger and more democratic. The Vice President Timmermans will be presenting the European Commission work programme in the plenary later today.
I would like to say that the Commission is not negotiating in a hostile mood. We want a deal. Those who don't want a deal, the no-dealers, they have no friends in the Commission. We want a fair deal with Britain, and we will have a fair deal with Britain. The no deal is not our working assumption. Thank you.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, President of the European Commission. As far as Portugal and Spain is concerned, the Parliament shares your position. Can I inform you that yesterday I announced to the plenary that you, the President of the Council, and myself have decided to give the Astoria Princess Prize to the victims of the tragedies in these two countries in the last few weeks. Let's start the debate now with the group representatives. The first to take the floor is Mr. Weber on behalf of the EPP.
Dear President, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, first of all, the European Council discussed the right priorities. First, about Brexit. We have unity thanks to the engagement of all of the leading figures and personalities. We underlined that there is no sufficient progress We clarified that there is no cherry picking possible. We are preparing a scenario for leaving without an agreement. I think that's a good step. And the business community, that is what we see from London side, is getting more and more nervous. And the Brexiteers have no common plan for the future of their country, and especially the relationships towards the European Union. That is the outcome when I look to what happens in the Council and when we look what happens in London. And one thing is additionally for us as EPP clear. If we are discussing about a treaty which will be finally will be asked for the consent in this House, then we are ready for a kind of a transitional period. But I have now already to clarify that we cannot accept that a country outside of the European Union will have the same conditions and the same status like a country inside of the European Union. So there must be a difference. That is Brexit. The second thing is about innovation. I thank for this priority to Donald Tusk. That is our future. It's needed. Combine resources, strengthen our budget. That is what we need. And we need clear projects. And one of these projects is Defence Union. This was also a discussion. The EPP is strongly in favour. We have a momentum on the table to go forward with our Defence Union. And one aspect is for us important. On the one thing is that we discuss about funds, about better financing of our defence structure. But I think towards the people, we need also visibility about what we are doing there. I can give you one concrete example which we are discussing in the EPP groups. There is a new threat about cyber war, cyber security, which is on the table. We think that small, medium countries and even the bigger countries in the European Union cannot defend themselves alone anymore in this globalized cyber world. That means for us, let's combine our forces. Let's really establish a European cyber defense brigade where we have this on European level, and let's make it visible with really officials and soldiers who have on their uniform the European flag, to make people aware that Europe together can defend our cyber infrastructure. Dear friends, ein anderer Punkt war die Diskussion.
A further point was the discussion on Turkey. We, as the EPP, welcome the cut in accession funds. The idea being to make it plain that we are very concerned about developments in Turkey. In the budgetary discussion, we'll also be talking about the cuts. I think we're all pushing in the same direction. And we have to talk about the targeting of funds which need to reach refugees. We need more clarity also when it comes to relations with Turkey. And we have to be mindful that we need a partnership, but the full membership cannot now be feasible, as the plenary has expressed several times. I was surprised that recently the President of Turkey went to Warsaw and addressed the Polish government. And was mentioned about the Polish government taking a hard-line approach to Muslims. The idea was expressed that Turkey should be a full member of the EU. So millions of Turkish citizens allegedly would flood into the EU, taking advantage of a freedom of movement. I think that is highly implausible. Colleagues, we have identified what our priorities are, but these are not being implemented fast enough. I'd like to address another point. The Africa issue, which Mr. Juncker rightly addressed. We've done our sums. For the 20th time this has been discussed in the Council. In other words, having a stronger border protection cooperation system. What have we attained? 1,500 officials. I've done my sums. That would mean one official every 33 kilometers between here and Frankfurt. So there is a lot of hot air, but not enough is being done. Colleagues, that's precisely why over the next few months we have to work hard. As the Commission President rightly indicated, we need to provide answers to all of these questions. And colleagues, people in Europe and surveys are telling us just how valuable this community is. The Catalan lands and the British are showing us that there is a risk of calling Europe into question, so we have to use this positive momentum to push for more Europe. As the German Bundestag is being set up, I hope that a new government in Berlin will take up the ball, take up this positive momentum and shape a positive future for Europe.
La parola ora all'onorevole Gianni Pittella.
Gianni Pittella for the Socialists. Thank you. The Council has taken a due note of the state of Brexit. As Mr. Juncker rightly said, we are in favour of an agreement, but deadlock is due to a lack of preparation on the part of the British government. But this isn't the only fracture line in Europe. The British departure, we've also got Catalonia right up to the north of Italy. The cracks are emerging. Forces are coming into being, kindling divisions within Europe. We're seeing the emergence of a kind of selfishness of the rich, a kind of reverse Robin Hood syndrome. The poor regions are being deprived of things to give to the rich regions. But I don't think the tax is the most important issue. There's nothing wrong in wanting more autonomy. I'm in favour firmly of a federal Europe. I want more autonomy, therefore, but not to the detriment of solidarity. Reallocation of resources from rich regions to poor regions is not charity, but it's part of an agreement for citizenship. There's a possible form of secession, more dramatic and more silence. The secession of those who can't keep up, those who have been left behind by globalization. They are rising up against the forces which have been established over the past 20 years. There's a paradox in play here which we need to keep an eye on. The uprise of those left behind, well, that's due to the actions of multi-billionaires who are giving a voice to those who have been left behind, as we've seen in the recent elections in, say, the Czech Republic. If we don't want a severely weakened Europe, we have to act immediately to put in these two fissures. President Tusk has put forward his proposal for an agenda for the European Council involving more meetings, more streamlined meetings, better work. Great. We need to focus not on the methodology, but how effective the results are. Our Parliament has done the right thing. We've signed off on the revision of the Dublin rules on asylum requests. That's major headway there, which has been made by the European Parliament. That's a historical step forward, and we've signed off on the revision of the Posted Workers Directive. That's also a major step forward, which has been made by the EP. So we, as a democratically elected institution, we are answering the calls made to us by our citizens on two important issues. People want us to round off on this with an agreement with the Council, and we want to put meat on the bones of the social pillar, as was recalled by President Juncker. We're 20 years down the road now. The social pillar is no good if it's just a slogan. The citizens are fed up with the slogans. They want action. Posted Workers Directive, that's been a success, but we also need to provide answers to those who are marginalised, people who are having to live on the streets, the homeless, people who are lagging behind technological progress, and people who are hard hit by globalisation. We need to help them. For them, the social pillar is not a magic word. It can't just be a slogan. Actions are required. So I would warmly recommend that the Council look carefully at these issues and focus less on the makeup of the European Parliament. It would be a bit odd if the EP told the Council how it ought to be composed, and we won't have the law laid down to us by the Council, now or in 2019 or whenever. ECR, Mr. Kamall.
Thank you very much. Gianni, I admire your idealism when you speak here, and it's important that we all tackle poverty, but I prefer community-led solutions rather than top-down. But let me just correct you on one of the myths that you highlighted, which is that Robin Hood's motivations. Let us remember that Robin Hood stole money from the tax collector to give the money back to taxpayers. Let us remember that when we are looking at the Robin Hood story. But last week's Council meeting highlighted one simple fact, that the EU is sometimes in danger of allowing idealism to get the better of pragmatism. This is certainly true when looking at the European Council's and Parliament's positions on the migration package and negotiations with the UK. Now, the ECR Group welcomes much of the Council's current strategy in tackling the migration crisis, closing trafficking routes across the Mediterranean, strengthening cooperation with international partners, returning unsuccessful applicants and strengthening the role of Frontex. 2 years ago, the ECR published these papers that called for exactly these kinds of sensible measures. And maybe if they had been introduced at the time, then maybe there would be more confidence in our migration and asylum system today. But instead, this Parliament appears to have a position on the Dublin regulation that throws out the rule book and long-established asylum laws to pursue a relocation system which has not exactly been a success, with proposals which mean that an asylum seeker would no longer have their application processed or even have a first admissibility check in the country that they arrive in, and continuing to force quotas on countries which have already said that they do not support relocation. This approach gives asylum seekers false hope and EU citizens false solutions, and these proposals will not increase solidarity, but they may increase voters' frustrations with politicians. So please, let us rethink the unintended consequences of the Parliament's proposals in a pragmatic way. And on the Brexit negotiations, let us be more pragmatic. As a British MEP who leads one of the largest political groups in this House, who enjoys good relations with people on both sides of the negotiating table, and who, like Jean-Claude, wants a mutually beneficial deal, I hope that we avoid becoming trapped by the sequencing of negotiations. For there to be real progress, we must take a step back and look at the process as a whole. Just as there needs to be an understanding from the UK as to where the EU27 are coming from, there also needs to be an understanding from the EU27 as to where the British people are coming from. The UK joined the EEC 40 years ago because more than anything it believed in open trade. That remains the UK's main motivation for its current relationship with the EU, and it will be a major motivation in creating the UK's future relationship with the EU and vice versa. So perhaps the more the EU talks about the issues that resonate with the UK, it may find that the UK is more willing to give concessions on the issues that the EU27 care most about and prioritise. So on both migration and UK negotiations, we may all find that while idealism may be a wonderful way to view the world, and sequencing may appear to be perfectly logical, it will be pragmatism that delivers the solutions that we all want to see.
Over to Mr. Verhofstadt for ALDE.
Thank you, President. First of all, I want to thank President Tusk for his intervention and also for the publicity he has made for my hashtag campaign. Thank you. I'm proud European, so you're also an adept of it. And I have to tell you, Mr. Tusk, the State of the Union of our President of the Commission a few weeks ago, we got a speech at the Sorbonne of Emmanuel Macron. We have now your agenda for the coming European Councils. I have to confess you something, that each time I have heard these proposals, the State of the Union, your agenda, I felt an enormous excitement. The same eagerness that I felt when I was a young boy and I was browsing through the colourful catalogues my mother received by the end of every year. The Trois Suisses was that in France. I think also in Luxembourg it exists. I think it's the Otto
in Germany, Otto, yeah, in Germany. So these shiny things in these catalogues seemed always so far away, dreams on colorful paper, I should say. And to be very honest, that's what I am feeling today, or better, what I'm fearing today again, that we have great plans, that we have huge ambitions, but are we really ready now, in this European Union, to make the radical changes to make it happen? Because there are a number, Mr. Tusk, of structural problems, structural flaws in the European Union that we need to solve. And the first, we know it, that is the unanimity rule that is still applied in the European Union and especially in the Council, who is blocking progress for decades now. The European arrest warrant, well, it has taken more than a decade to implement it because of the unanimity rule. Or the European patent, we have to wait more than 25 years because of the unanimity rule. And the same is happening for the energy union. We don't have an energy union because of the unanimity rule, and we don't have a full-fledged banking union still because of the unanimity rule. The Americans were capable in 9 months to react to the financial crisis with cleaning up the banks, an investment program of 900 billion, quantitative easing of 1.2 trillion. And we, after 9 years, we are still debating all this because of unanimity. And maybe we have it's a good moment to recall this, because with the posting of workers, for once the Council have taken a position. Why? Because they didn't apply the unanimity. For once they have voted in the Council and they have reached a position. So that's the first thing to do. Are we ready? There is a proposal by Jean-Claude Juncker to massively use passerelles to solve the problem. Are we ready to finish this unanimity rule inside the Council and inside our institutions? And the second is structural weakness. We know is the long, endless list of opt-ins, opt-outs, earmarks, exceptions in our institutions. Are we ready to finish this Europe à la carte instead of continuing it as we still do? And finally, the third disease we need to cure is what I call the Potemkin syndrome of the European Union. And that is that we always make beautiful plans, but without creating the necessary instruments, the necessary tools, the necessary budget to make it happen. Schengen without a border and coast guard, the euro without a treasury, foreign policy without a European defence community. So the moment of truth, Mr. Tusk, is coming at a day, and it's coming very soon, where we will decide on the new multi-annual financial framework. Are we really ready to implement these ambitious plans of Jean-Claude Juncker, of Emmanuel Macron, of your agenda? Well, then it's necessary that we also be ready to open this financial framework and to give more than the formal 1%, which is ridiculous, naturally, if we want to fulfill all the ambitions that we have to do. And it's not really 1%. If you deduct from that the contributions that we receive from the member states, and we're going immediately back to the member states, it's only 0.14%. To protect our citizens against external threats, to protect our citizens and our borders internally, and at the same time to organise also the currency union with 1%, sorry, that's not possible. And to those populists and nationalists who are always saying, oh, this European superstate, a budget of 1%, and then talking about the European superstate, I think it's ridiculous and it makes no sense at all. But that is the moment of truth. The moment of truth will not be all the list of summits. The moment of truth will be when we will discuss the money, when we will discuss the budget, and when we discuss the new multi-annual financial framework. And that brings me finally, Mr. Tusk, to the remark you have made on the composition of the Parliament and the announcement that there will be an informal summit on it on the 23 of February. Oh, fantastic. Now, maybe there are other things that I could organise to have an informal summit about, but you have to know the legislative initiative for the composition of the Parliament is this Parliament and not the European Council. I have to tell you that. And what I expect is that the European Council is backing the proposal that will be made by a huge majority here in the House. That is what I expect. And that will be a proposal, one, based on the reduction of the number. That's a fair point. That will be a proposal that is finally putting justice in the system, with aggressive proportionality, not for once, so that we have not all 5 years to restore the work. And that will be, if everybody is of that opinion, a proposal in which we create a European democracy with transnational lists securing the Spitzenkandidaten. And if I may give you one little advice, don't open again the Spitzenkandidaten. We decided here in 2014, it's an enormous achievement of European democracy. It's because the Spitzenkandidaten that we have here are President Jean-Claude Juncker, and we will never accept that you change anymore this system and this achievement of European democracy. Thank you.
Per il gruppo confederale della...
For the GUE, the floor goes to Gabriele ZIMMER.
Meine
Presidents, the last summit took place against a backdrop in the EU that showed very closely that early statements a few weeks ago that we're out of the crisis are simply not true. We've had the elections in Germany, in Austria, in the Czech Republic. We've got the crisis in Spain and Catalonia. All of this shows that there's a lot up in the air. There are a lot of threats facing us and that we have to stand together. President, you made it very clear what your vision is about how the Council can better shoulder its responsibility in the future. You have reminded the heads of government about their own political responsibility. In the way I've understood it, you have made it very clear that responsibility cannot continually be pushed into someone else's court, and that decisions to be taken in the Council cannot simply be lost in translation or the Bermuda Triangle, and decisions have to actually be enacted. You have presented decision notes and you've said that they have to be drawn up very quickly so that we can see where agreement lies. And then you're suggesting that enhanced cooperation can begin. However, that begs the question for me, does this mean that proposals made by the Commission in the spring on the 5 scenarios, does it mean that anything out of that has already been implemented? And first of all, is there really going to be a broad debate with the citizens in the member states in the EU? Verhofstadt and others have also pointed out contradictions within the structure of democratic decision-making within the EU. I would like to know whether agreement about the leaders' agenda means that we are moving away from the failed intergovernmental methods that Chancellor Merkel has used so often, and that this means, for example, that the fiscal compact was introduced in that way, circumventing the European Parliament, but the Commission then had to enforce that agreement. Does this mean then that the responsibility of heads of state and government in the Council, does it mean that, for example, the finance group of the Eurogroup, other such bodies that do not have legitimacy are now going to be restricted? Now, does it mean that in future such a body, where the Parliament has no oversight, does it mean now that they will continue to have influence on people's lives? And so can we have clarification in the Council? Who is doing what? Or is it possible in the future then that the finance ministers will continue laying down the law to the heads of government? How does the Council envisage future cooperation with the European Parliament and the national parliaments in the very shortened period for debate that you proposed? How are we going to be involved? What kind of consequences are there going to be, for example, on interinstitutional cooperation? Is it the case now that you can simply lay down the law and tell us what you're going to do? That's not acceptable as far as I'm concerned. And then the debate about the social pillar, that has shown them that we need further clarification. The Council has taken on a proposal from us. The Commission has tabled a proposal. What is going to be the extent of the Parliament's involvement after all our debate if you are signing up to these agreements? We need clarification. It cannot simply be laid down by diktat. Then on Brexit, very briefly, my group is concerned about two main things. We would like clarification from the Council. Can you define what the criteria are between last week's Council meeting and the Council in December by which we will determine there's been sufficient progress? How are you going to measure that? Or is it effectively a political discretion? We do not want the citizens in the UK or other member states to have to pay the price for a no deal. However, we want to have a deal which ensures that citizens' rights and the rights of citizens in Northern Ireland are properly enforced. And of course, a reasonable financial settlement has to be part of that. And then a comment on the migration crisis. I gather then that by June, you will try to achieve agreement on the migration issues. However, what I'm missing is a very clear statement. No support for the Libyan Coast Guard if humanitarian and sea rescue is not adhered to. No criminalization of rescue at sea. No criminalization of rescue action at sea. I'd like to hear more on that, please.
Per il Gruppo Verde.
For the Greens, Philippe Lambert.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, President. President Tusk, it's always a pleasure to welcome you here, because we here all believe that consolidating the European project and deepening the project can't be done against member states, but only with them. After September's State of the Union address, perhaps the best we've heard here, it's a pleasure for you to hear you here evoking your vision for the future of Europe. What you're setting out is a calendar for meetings with topics that we should look at. The calendar which we in the Parliament and the Commission has been publishing for years. And so finally the Council is starting to organise their work. Perhaps they might even make their debates public one day soon. There is, however, increasing differences between your institution and the one that I represent. For example, on asylum and immigration in the summit last week, we repeatedly heard that Fortress Europe is willing to work with some of the worst regimes in order to ensure that none of their subjects set foot on European territory. But Fortress Europe is not impenetrable, and we know that some of our member states are still facing the challenges of migration. I'm thinking of Greece, Italy, Malta, Bulgaria. And they are facing these challenges, and we have to remember Dublin. Last year, there was a proposal to try to correct this unfair regime. Last week, the Parliament, through Mrs. Wikström's report, managed to improve the text in order to ensure that Member States demonstrate solidarity in providing their response to the challenge of migration and asylum. I was in the Council press room last week and I heard your press conference. And I was surprised to hear you say that the Council will be looking at this problem in December with the idea of maybe finding some kind of solution at the beginning of 2018. So that's 2 years after the Commission's proposal and 8 months after the agreement was reached here in Parliament. So when I hear you talk about the leaders' agenda, I think followers' agenda would be a bit more appropriate. And then fiscal competition would be my next point. We're seeing immobility from your council. And particularly, it's the multinationals who should be the biggest taxpayers in Europe. Other topics that have been debated for years here, and Council only reached an agreement yesterday. We in Parliament have been working on topics, particularly Mrs. Morin-Chartier. We are working on texts which will not only protect the internal market, but we want to protect workers from exploitation. Mr. Tusk, I can see you're interested in what I'm saying. I can see that you're listening. I'll continue. It's not a problem. The Parliament has people from the same political parties, the same countries as the Council. So tell me, how is it possible that the Parliament can deal with the same topics as complicated as the ones that you're dealing with, and that we can have ambitious agreements with broad consensus on very topical, very complex topics, and that proves to be impossible in the Council? Heads of state and government should have risen to the challenge and seen that in the 21st century their task should be protect all, not just a minority of citizens. They should know that they should be able to overcome national interest and political ambition. They should be even more ambitious in bringing innovative solutions to the challenges of this century. For example, digitalizing the economy. What can we do to avoid a cyber proletariat? It should be the Council that are encouraging the Parliament to move quicker to find to reach a mandate for negotiating. So if I may conclude by quoting Jacques Brel, dream an impossible dream. To try to reach the stars, that's our model. Thank you.
For EFDD, Raymond Finch.
Mr. President. President Tusk, we see that yourself, Michel Barnier and President Juncker have all stated that there is some progress being made in negotiations with Prime Minister May, and that the EU will evaluate progress on each of these issues in December. However, the underlying meaning of this progress is plain for all to see. The meaning is that the British Prime Minister is conceding ever more ground to the EU than standing up for that which the people of the UK voted. The people of my nation voted not just to leave the EU 28, but to regain our sovereignty. What Mrs May is doing is quietly surrendering so that we will end up neither leaving nor sovereign. We will remain subservient to the EU, both financially and legally, a nation condemned to serfdom by its own leaders. For this, I do not blame the EU or its negotiators. You are only pursuing your perception of the interests of your project. For this, I condemn the UK government. By its supine behaviour, it has forfeited the trust of the British people. whether they originally voted either to leave or remain. More than that, it has betrayed those who voted it into power at the last election. This Conservative Party, who won the election with the slogan "Brexit means Brexit." The fact this government is slowly backtracking on its commitment to the British people must stick in the craw of those who voted for it. Although the EU is, in the way it's conducting these negotiations, breaking the United Nations Declaration on Principles of International Law, which clearly states no state may use or encourage the use of economic, political or any other type of measures to coerce another state in order to obtain from it the subordination of the exercise of its sovereign rights and to secure from it advantages of any kind. And indeed its own treaty commitments to sincere cooperation and the progressive abolition of restrictions on international trade. The fault lies with Her Majesty's government for not having the courage of our convictions and saying enough is enough. The other side is not seeking negotiation but capitulation and walking away. Whatever the financial settlements Mrs May finally agrees to pay, whether it's £100 or £100 billion, it will simultaneously be too much and too little. Too little for those in the EU who seek to punish us for having the temerity to seek our own path. For those ideologues, no punishment is too great for those who seek self-determination. And too much for those of us who wish nothing more than to be good friends, neighbours, allies and partners of those we leave behind. Because this extortion will poison UK-EU relations for years to come. For the good of us all, we should now shake hands and walk away. Thank you.
Per il gruppo.
On behalf of Europe of Nations for Freedom, Mr. Bay.
Mesdames et messieurs, chers...
Ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, trade relations have been largely led by the Council, and Mr. Juncker said that you don't want our citizens to see all trade agreements as an attack on our main interests. But it's your role, Mr. Juncker, to ensure that free trade agreements are not negotiated to the detriment of our people, which has been the case. You're saying we want to have that kind of relation with Mercosur or Mexico, and it means that our farmers are going to face unfair competition from countries that don't respect any kind of healthcare or social or environmental legislation. In France, farmers are committing suicide weekly. It's time to stop these crazy policies which entirely violate our rights and our vital interests. On the posting of workers, everyone agrees that the agreement reached yesterday is not a real progress and won't solve any of the substantive issues. Our road transport sector, for example, isn't really covered, and you're not looking at the main issue, which is social contributions paid in the country of origin, which again creates unfair competition, and it means that the salary of the posted workers is 1.5 or 2 times more expensive than a local worker. So it's unfair competition within the EU, it's social dumping and a problem for our member states. Then on Turkey, we are applying pre-accession rates, but Turkey already receives a large amount of money from the EU it's supposed to be handling migration flows, but it doesn't always work. So what we need now is to have a clear position. Turkey should not be a member state of the European Union. We have to put an end to the pre-accession or accession agreements. Turkey, by its geographical position, its culture and history, should not be a member state.
La parola.
Mr. Korwin-Mikke, non-attached members.
Panie Przewodniczący.
Thank you, Chair.
The problem of migration is about the non-respect of the Schengen rules. The reason is racism that prevails in the EU. When an Australian, an American or a Russian comes to the EU and wants to cross the Schengen border without documents, we stop them by force. We even shoot at them. If there are 10,000 Somalians, Nigerians or people from Niger, we let them free and we arrange for documents for them without asking any questions. The EU is weak towards the powerful. So that's a collapse. And now to Mr. Pittella, I'd like to tell him that he's right. Socialism is about robbing the poor and giving to the rich. That is why such people as Buffett support socialism and the left and not the free market. And I also think that the EU should be destroyed. Thank you.
La parola onorevole.
Mr. Brok.
President of the European Council, President of the Commission, colleagues. After Mr. Juncker's presentations and Mr. Tusk's, I've become a little bit more optimistic. I think that slowly on the side of the Executive and the Council, there's a gradual understanding that progress in Europe and the fight against anti-democratic populism can only be pursued if we make progress in certain areas where people understand, namely more security. A decent Africa policy is security policy, a decent social policy, and congratulations on the posted workers policy and the social pillar. That is an increased feeling of security for citizens, and I believe that is progress. Common foreign and security policy, PESCO, might be just a start. We need to make progress, and then we don't just want 1% of the House, but 1.24% that have already been approved in terms of principle, and I think that has to become clearer. And now I'd like to say something about Brexit. I'd like to thank the Council, but in particular the Commission and Michel Barnier for having stuck to the mandate and showing a very clear line. If Tories are having difficulty, particularly when it comes to the financial obligations in getting an agreement that can be negotiated, that is not then a reason for us, in the interest of the European citizens, to depart from our clear mandate. We want to have constructive negotiations. We want a decent result. We want to have good relations in the future to limit the damage from Brexit as much as possible. However, the obligations that we have, Mr. KAMALL, to use those as a trade-off to get better trade relations, I think that's a rather strange way to proceed. We've agreed on the sequencing, and I think we need to make movements so that we can reach the decision in December that can open the way ahead to the second phase. Mr. KAMALL, I'm not entirely sure what the role of Robin Hood is here. Thank you.
Mr. Brok, there is a blue card for you. Do you want to answer? There is a blue card for you. Please, you have the floor.
Herr President. Surely, Mr. Brok, it's not a matter of right that the European Union demands this money. It's a matter of necessity. Would you not agree with me? Because you are broke.
President, colleagues, it's my impression that if I look at financial debt per capita, it's a far greater problem for the UK than other European countries because your debt per year is higher than other member states. The second point is, if you have debts, you have to pay off your debts. That is part of the honest trader policy. If you want to agree on things with us, you have to finance those commitments. That's a completely normal way to proceed. And I believe that you have to recognize that. The EU is not a golf club that you can simply leave, but you have taken on commitments for the citizens in your country and our countries, and those commitments have to be shouldered, and then we'll be prepared to engage in fair negotiations.
Honorable Rodriguez.
Mrs. Rodriguez.
The European Union needs this ambitious roadmap to meet the future challenges, this is for sure. And we can see a promising alignment of the European institutions, Parliament, Council, European Council and Commission. But let me be clear, we need to deliver on the roadmap, deliver with concrete measures. And it means that on the social pillar, if you want to have a real social pillar, we need to translate this in a measure making sure that all people in employment, whatever their jobs, they can count on the decent labour contract and they can count on full access to social protection. If we want to have a real reform of the Eurozone in order to promote growth and convergence, this will only happen if we provide the Eurozone with the fiscal capacity to help and to support member states in this direction. If you want to have a real European asylum system, the Council should adopt the recent reform of the Dublin system just adopted by the European Parliament. And if you want Europe to promote a better world order, yes, we need to use trade agreements, but pushing sustainable development goals with these trade agreements. So these are very concrete measures to deliver on the roadmap with credibility. But the main test will be the next European budget, because all this ambition needs to be met by a real overlap of the community budget in such a way that we can meet these new priorities. Finally, as many other groups, SD Group is underlining here that we consider that the Spitzenkandidaten, the choice of the President of the European Commission by electing him or her in the European Parliament is a major democratic development which must be completely respected. This is our wish and our warning.
Thank you. And now for 3 minutes, I give the floor to Mr. Legutko.
Thank you, Madam President. Ladies and gentlemen, there is not much that could be said about the last Council meeting. Nothing really happened that would amount to a breakthrough, the Brexit being a case in point. On the other hand, this need not be a bad thing, considering that the hyperactivity of the European institution usually creates more problems than it solves. On the positive side, I think immigration seems to be treated with conspicuously more sense than in the past. The President of the Council himself at the meeting admitted that the mandatory relocation was not a good idea. It took him a lot of time to admit what many other governments said right at the outset. He should have listened to us, not those he usually listens to. And there is also a problem of Nord Stream 2, this notorious hostile, politically hostile Russian-German energy enterprise. As might have been expected, the Council failed to give a sufficiently strong signal to the European Commission to dump it. Germany, the German government, being clearly supportive of Nord Stream, and the Commission, which so eagerly roars like a lion when confronted with weaker partners in cases like Nord Stream, seems to behave more like a sheep, pardon me the comparison, and I can safely predict it will continue to do so. And let me now reply to Mr. Weber. I want to thank him for pointing out the alleged inconsistency, I would say, in Polish politics, and by way of courtesy, I would like to reciprocate, though he is not here. And which is the real thing, I wonder? What Mr. Weber, representing the ruling party of Germany, says here, criticizing Nord Stream, or the German government policy that relentlessly carries out this impossible and politically dangerous project. So which is the real thing? Is it confusion, or maybe, as some say, it's a deliberate strategy?
Thank you. For 1.5 minutes, Madam Wikström.
Thank you, President. Well, migration and the need of reform of the common European asylum system was discussed last week in Council, which was very, very timely, to say the least, not least since the LIBE Committee on Thursday adopted with a very large majority our position on the necessary reform of the Dublin regulation. I have managed to gather behind me and to unite this House in a very bold proposal, creating a truly European asylum system. And we have managed to do so through long negotiations and by listening to each other. Now, I think it's high time that you in Council do exactly the same. Listen to each other and start paying respect to each other, that you do leave national egoism behind. It belongs to history and not to the current situation in Europe. We can never create a functioning common European asylum system as long as every member state is obsessed about their own national situation. We need now to create a fair system that works for all of Europe with all its member states. And such a system has to include an automatic relocation of asylum seekers and must be based on the principle of solidarity as in Article 80 of our treaties. The goal has to be to fix the asylum system, not only to find some watered-down compromise that can reach unanimity in Council. It's high time that you take a majority vote, a qualified majority vote on this, because otherwise we will never change reality. I welcome that Council has signalled that you will continue working on this and put it to reaching a mandate before the spring. Negotiations in trilogues will be long and difficult, but I look forward in opening those trilogues rather sooner than later. The European Parliament has delivered. It's now high time that you do the same. We owe it to the citizens of Europe who expect this from us. Thank you.
For 1 minute, Mr. HADJIGEORGIOU.
President, we've heard in this room that one of the problems of the European Union is the need for unanimity. Mr. Verhofstadt said that, and he's not in the room. He's right as regards his concerns, but he's not right as regards his conclusion, because the need for unanimity is present when we don't have equal partners, and we are not equal in this room. The example of the US makes me think of the following thing. Have you ever heard Utah complaining? This is a state that produces oil. Have they ever complained for Georgia that only produces peanuts? Mr. Juncker came here some time ago and actually accepted the haircut of the Cypriot economy, and he went back saying that I came to Brussels trustworthy and I returned untrustworthy. Today he was congratulated by Mr. Schäuble for his decision of the past. The leader actually congratulates the subjugator for his decisions. Mr. Juncker said something about Turkey. This middle situation, this limbo between Turkey and Cyprus is the worst thing. They will either move forward or we will stop, because this limbo sends a message that we are making full of out of them.
For Mr. Terricabras.
Gracias. Thank you very much, Chair. I suppose we will concur that the situation in Catalonia is of importance, but I fear that on this the EU keeps on making mistakes. Firstly, in the last European Council, the matter was not actually on the agenda. People still think that this is a domestic matter, but it's a domestic matter for the EU as well, I think. As Pittella said, Catalonia is not a fissure, it's a commitment for more democracy. Secondly, the Commission is applauding the measures taken by the Spanish government to supplant democracy in Catalonia and switch power to Madrid as if Catalonia were a colony. You are applauding the supplantation of democracy. How is that feasible? Thirdly, as we have the three presidents here, you've all received the Prince of Asturias Prize in Spain. And having heard your speeches of gratitude, you seem to have welcomed the prize. But the prize was meant to encourage harmony. Fourthly, I feel disenfranchised by the President of my Parliament. He, just like the King of Spain, has forsaken his role as an honest broker. The President, it behoves him to speak to all the MEPs among the different parties, not just the Spanish ones. It's a pity that some of us seem to have been sidelined. For all of these reasons and many others, it's no surprise that the pro-European Catalans are now a thorn in your side. Are you really worried about diversity, citizens and democracy in Europe? It would seem not. Democracy should be at the service of people. We need to have more democracy without stamping on it, without hitting it, without sticking it in clink.
Sir, there is a blue card question, if you would take it from Mr. Polčák. For 30 seconds, your question, please, sir.
Thank you for accepting my blue card. Colleague, my question is, don't you think that within this debate the European Union should respect the internal constitutional structure of Spain? I don't think this issue should come up within this debate, so I'd like to hear from you what you think about my remark. Thank you.
First, the European Union is concerned about all member countries, and they discuss things in Hungary and in Poland, not in Spain, first. And secondly, the Spanish constitution has been interpreted in the way the Spanish government has said, but over 600 experts have said that it's allowed in Spain to have a referendum. Thank you.
And now, for 1.5 minutes, Mr. Paksas.
Chairman, the main problem which will determine the future of the European Union is in Catalonia. What I mean is the view of the leaders of the European Union that people are destroying the democracy. We have to listen to those who say that we have our identity, our language, our culture, and it cannot be imposed from above. It is not the family issues. The Christian religion It is the understanding and returning to the main issues which unite Europe. This is the only way which can guarantee the survival of Europe. We cannot keep on saying that events in Catalonia is only the internal matter of Spain. Let's remember the speech of the former President of the US, Wilson, that each nation is free to decide on its future. I invite all of you to sit and negotiate with the leaders of Catalonia and Spain and help them find a peaceful solution. Mr. Juncker, Mr. Tusk, you can do this and you have to do this.
Graaf, 1 minute, please.
Voorzitter, elke conclusie van de...
President, the Council conclusions are all incorrect, but the conclusion with regard to Turkey is particularly unacceptable. The Council discusses Turkey and concludes that member states have to implement decisions on migrations and cooperate. This is absolute hypocrisy. President, Turkey is an Islamist dictatorship. It's a country which exterminates its minorities. It persecutes freedom of expression and the media and puts political opposition in prison. We should have the opposite conclusion. The EU should suspend any accession talks with Turkey. Greece should stop any migrants from passing, and trade agreements should be suspended. And funding for any Islamist party should be forbidden. And I hope, Mr. Tusk, that next time the councils will be able to reach this conclusion.
There is a blue card question from Mr. Frunzulică. Will you take the question, please? Okay, 30 seconds. Thank you.
Dear colleague, don't you think so, take into consideration the importance of Turkey for the European Union security and stability, that it's better to cooperate and have a kind of cooperation with Turkey instead of, having Turkey as an enemy or as a foe of the European Union? Don't you think so? It's better to cooperate with Turkey? Thank you.
Voorzitter, samenwerken met Turkije kan...
President, you can cooperate in many different ways with Turkey. Here we're talking about Turkey's accession to the EU, and we don't want that. Cooperation, yes, from a trade perspective, but is it a reliable military partner? Turkey has acquired arms. It's a member of NATO, so it's a partner in NATO, but it's not reliable.
Our next speaker is Mrs. Dodds, but I don't see her in the chamber, so I now give the floor. Madam Dodds, I do apologise. You now have 1 minute. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. Most of us watching from the United Kingdom we're pleased to see that the Council meeting ended up in a better mood and a better spirit of cooperation than what we have previously seen. I welcome the progress that seems to have been made in moving towards trade negotiations, hopefully in December. The United Kingdom seeks a deal that is mutually beneficial. It seeks a deal that recognises a strong, independent United Kingdom cooperating and working beside a European Union. And that cooperation can be in areas of defence and areas of the economy and things that are important to all of us. Can I say, in respect of Northern Ireland, I fear that these institutions are in danger of overreach. The guarantors of the Belfast Agreement are the British and Irish governments, not the European institutions. And while Europe has been enormously helpful in building peace, we need to remember the primary operators and the primary legislators in this particular area. It is most important. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Coburn wants to ask a blue card, but you've already had a blue card, so I'm going to be a bit restrictive on this occasion. So one blue card. No, I apologise, I made my decision. For 2 minutes, Mr. Lewandowski, please. Thank you.
Thank you. The most desired public good in contemporary Europe is the feeling of security. This is the greatest deficit we have in our times, and the biggest battlefield of populism on the right and on the left. This is also the greatest yardstick of credibility of EU institutions. Reading the conclusions of the last European Council, in that respect, we can be moderate optimisms, because the chaos of 2015 is being transformed in the management of migration in 2017. Instead of curing the symptoms under the pressure of time and events, we are looking for prevention. We're looking at the source of the problems, and we are not just automatically relocating migrants. That doesn't have a future in the EU. I'm satisfied with the fact that the European Parliament is participating in the exercise, making a good contribution to the reform of the asylum law. Now, a few words on the leaders' agenda in the aspect that interests me most, the future of the European budget. It is easy to notice that the calendar of the leaders' agenda is slightly divergent with the State of the Union speech and the resolution that's going to be approved by the European Parliament, and that includes the desire to end the negotiations and to reach an agreement for the period post-2020 before the European elections in 2019. I have participated in the talks, sharing my doubts, remembering my own experience, pointing to the fact that it recently took us 2.5 years, but I see a bit more than wishful thinking. I see determination to show that the EU is able to act, to show that yes, we can, also here in Europe. So knowing we can't do this without leaders, without the heads of states and governments, we definitely need to agree upon scenarios among European institutions to walk forward together and fast. Thank you.
Thank you. 1.5 minutes. Madam Fajon.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Last time this year, the migrants on Lesbos woke up deep in snow. The temperatures dropped to almost -18 degrees. Some of the migrants have been trapped on Greek islands for 2 years. And the European leaders insist that the agreement with Turkey is functioning, that after having closed the West Balkan route, you will manage to close the Central Mediterranean route. Instead of focusing simultaneously on financing and training of the Libyan Coast Guard, as well as on enhancing safe and legal ways for people who are eligible for international protection, you are paying all of your attention to how to prevent migrants to come to Europe. Not enough or no attention is being paid to a radical reform of the European asylum system. Last week, the European Parliament adopted a good proposal, according to which the burden will not be on the state of entry alone. We agreed that we urgently need a permanent automatic relocation system in which all member states will participate. We expect such an agreement from the European governments as well. Due to the malfunctioning European asylum system and policy, we are experiencing internal border controls in several Schengen states. In May, Commissioner Avramopoulos said that Austria, Germany, Denmark, Sweden and Norway would be able to extend the internal controls only once more for the last time. 6 months after that, Austria still maintains internal control at its border with Slovenia, for which there is absolutely no reason. Therefore, distinguished presidents, your conclusions how you're devoted to Schengen are not sincere, and I deeply regret that. Thank you.
Mr. Henkel, 1 minute.
Let me remind you, ladies and gentlemen, that I was against Brexit. Mr. Brok, you mentioned that term golf club. Let me also remind you that the European Union was, from the viewpoint of the British, once a football club.
And if the management of the club changes the football club to a golf club, then I wonder who has left really whom. I think it is time that we also criticize the negotiation strategy of the Commission and the Council. It is illogical, it is dangerous, and I think it is unfair. It is illogical because the EU insists on a financial offer by the British government before an agreement of trade. I just wonder, Herr Juncker, would you ever agree on a price for something you don't know what you buy for? It is dangerous because everybody here agrees that peace in Ireland must be preserved at all cost. Well, nowhere in the world is there a border arrangement without a trade or customs arrangement. How will you ever get such an agreement without negotiations on trade? And finally, it is grossly unfair. Mr. Tusk, you mentioned many times European values. Let me remind you of the fact that democracy, freedom of press, human rights are not European values. They are universal values. And I would like to also remind you that we have something like British values, and that is fairness. And it is about time that you recognize fairness as a European value.
Mr. Henkel, Mr. Brok has a question. You will accept? Herr Henkel? Ja, danke. Herr Brok.
Mr. Henkel, now I don't want to know from you who's being fair in their negotiation, but every development from the EU, from the Single Act, from Maastricht, from Nice, from Amsterdam and the Lisbon Treaty has been ratified with a qualified majority in the House of Commons. So you cannot say anything's been imposed. They've been involved in the negotiations and they've decided it in their parliament. So I don't know what you're talking about.
The British entered the European Union under three conditions: subsidiarity, self-responsibility of a country's debts, and competition. All three factors you find in the Lisbon Agreement. In the course of various tries and attempts to save the euro, these three principles have been grossly violated. And that led to a continuous centralization and bureaucratization of the European Union. And that finally contributed to Brexit.
Madam Innefeld, for 1 minute, please. Madam Innefeld? Your speaking time? No? Okay, a mistake. We pause then to move onwards. You are on my list, but you don't want to take the floor. And I'll give the floor for 1 minute to Madam SAKORAFA.
My dear colleagues, I read and listened carefully to the conclusions of the European Council and the positions of the Commission on PESCO and issues concerning security and defence that we are going to discuss extensively during the next months. Concerning the relationship with Turkey, there is one sentence saying nothing, in spite of the repeated resolutions of the Parliament. Concerning the refugee issue, 4 pages with objective, a fortress Europe, and only 1 paragraph with a vague wording on addressing the causes of immigration and refugees. You describe cooperation with Libya and neighbouring countries on the limits of destabilization, and you blackmail them with development funds, trade, visas, having as objective trapping immigrants and refugees in settlements and camps. You certainly know that this is a time bomb that will explode soon, and we'll all pay the price, high price. Your policy divides Europe, and unfortunately some continue investing in transitory gains. I'm curious, what vision of Europe will you present in the future to the people?
Thank you. 1 minute, Mr. URTASUN.
Mr. Tusk, Mr. Juncker, listening to the Commission spokesperson yesterday, it seems that you're now considering the Catalan matter is closed. Article 155 is being applied and that's it. But there's nothing further than the truth. We're 3 days from a real disaster. The imposition of the Generalitat means an institution before the 78 constitution is coming to play. We're going to have a huge crisis. On top of that, there's been detention of 2 Catalans unfairly and arbitrarily from civil society. And on top of that, we are facing a possible unilateral declaration of independence that is not subject to majority in the Catalonian people. And on top of that, you're saying there's a lot of people in Catalonia who are very worried, who want to reply. If our governors are unable to have a dialogue and reach a consensus and then a negotiated outcome, the people of Catalonia hope from the President of the Council, your Council and the European Commission to have an answer worthy of your name.
And I now go back and give the floor to Madam in 't Veld for 1 minute. You are on the list. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. There was a misunderstanding. And Mr. Tusk is gone in the meantime. But I would briefly like to say something about the asylum policies. And Mr. Tusk very proudly announced that they will, at some point in 2018, agree on border control. But that is actually not the same as a proper asylum policy. Fortress Europe, that is what the Council is trying to build, keeping people out. And it's remarkable that this House, with 751 MEPs representing more than 200 political parties, is able to come to agreement. And we are the one legislator, and the Council, with 28 individuals, is totally unable to reach agreement on one of the most important challenges of this moment. And I think that is totally irresponsible. And I think it only shows the total bankruptcy of the intergovernmental method. And I really hope that the Council is now going to move forward on the files that have been adopted here, Dublin, the reception conditions, because we have been waiting. Reception conditions we have voted almost half a year ago. The Council is completely paralysed, and we cannot wait until next summer for a solution. We need a decision by the Council now. It's your responsibility.
1 minute for Mr. Lundgren. Thank you.
Tack så mycket, fru talman. Vad gäller sammansättning...
Thank you, Chair. When we're talking about the composition of the Parliament, and as Mr. Tusk mentioned, I can embrace what he said. Fewer countries need fewer seats. That makes sense, and that's a message we can convey to citizens. The Göteborg conference is just around the corner. You're all aware that I'm critical about the EU, but I'm also quite pragmatic. As long as we're a member, we will have to try and put a stop to social dumping in the Swedish labour market. Those who think that the Swedish labour market is hunky-dory surely can't have visited us and seen what's going on the ground. You don't appreciate how our haulage and transport market have been suffering due to the number of dodgy players on the market. Workers are being exploited and the money is flowing into other people's pockets. I can't accept that. I hope that I would rather Sweden not play ball with the EU and leave. But as long as this is not the case, we will just have to try and improve conditions as best we can. Do visit Sweden and see what's going on the ground.
To WEIDENHOLZER, 1 minute, please.
Thank you, President. I would like us to come back to the debate of the Council on the 19th of October and realise that migration was one of the dominant topics. All we can say is that there's a lack of decisiveness here. There's a lack of enforcement power and a lack of autonomy. After all, we're relying on Turkey, but they're not a reliable partner. So it would be far more clever if the plans could then be implemented in the regions themselves. We need to do that. In Germany, Home Affairs Minister Julian de Maizière, they have already mentioned this. Other people have said that the regions themselves should be doing this. But that's not happening. Look at Libya. where there's more need for help, and Lebanon, more help needed. What about the agreements with Tunisia, Morocco, Algeria? We should make agreements to keep the people there, not a policy which allows an exodus from Africa to Europe. Secondly, Turkey, 640 million by way of pre-accession aid to 2020. That's more than 4.5 billion euros altogether, even though Erdogan himself is saying he doesn't want to join the EU. There are more and more calls to break off negotiations. Please listen to that. Break off the negotiations with, between the EU and Turkey about accession to the EU. Thank you.
Madam James, 1 minute, please.
Good morning, Chamber. Well, Halloween is nearly here, and on cue, the European Union rises to the occasion with two positions and two leaders. Truly, European Union Jekyll and Hyde politics is alive and kicking. Now, what have we learnt in the last couple of weeks? Well, we've learnt that insufficient progress should be translated as give us more money. And when you're Mrs Merkel and looking to finance the budget matters, trying to handle a €100 billion deficit in your own country, and also knowing that no member state will cover the deficits created by the Brexit negotiations, no wonder that's happening. But then we get this document, ladies and gentlemen, and for all of you arch-federalists, I'm sure you're delighted with the fact that Mr Juncker and President Macron have authored this. Well, for anybody proud of their country and proud of sovereignty, this is not the document that Brexit supports, and thankfully Brexit will happen.
Monsieur Proust, 2 minutes, please.
President, the last European Council showed that heads of state and government have understood the messages we've been sending out for months now. And the agreement on the revision to the posting of workers shows this, and shows that fighting social dumping is a priority in Europe. We've been able to achieve this agreement through the work done by Mrs Morin-Chartier. Fighting migration and illegal immigration, we have to strengthen the readmission agreements with third countries and to make European aid conditional on tangible results, because third countries also have to take their share of the responsibility. We have to strengthen the means available to border guards and coast guards, and that's also important to continue to protect our borders. Citizens also expect clear results for their security. There's a €100 million fund to try to deal with threats in public places, and we have to welcome all of this. We also need European defence worthy of the name. But if we want that to be effective, then we need to see the permanent structured cooperation announced last June being supported by all member states, particularly through a European industrial development policy in the area of defence. I also would like to deplore the lack of clarity in our relations with third countries. There was only one line on Turkey. But we know there are too many fundamental differences between the EU and Turkey. We need to finally move beyond this ambiguity and hypocrisy. Citizens and civil society require clarity. We know that the best relations between the EU and Turkey won't occur through accession. With Brexit, yes, we need to remember diplomacy, but there's also the political side. We have to respect our red lines, divorce, before we establish the future relationship. It's clear where we are and what we want, and that's the only way we can ensure a proper future for Europe.
1.5 minutes, Mr. Bostinaru.
Dear Mr. President Juncker, dear Mr. President Tusk, the EU's security and defence is not only PESCO, but PESCO is certainly an essential element of today's Europe's security and defence, and a powerful tool to help in the long path towards a truly integrated European defence. This is why we strongly welcome what we hope can be considered as a promise that by the end of this year PESCO will become reality. Until not long ago, the logic of national sovereignty was prevailing over the logic of the integration in the defence field. but under the current circumstances the EU can no longer afford this. Now that all necessary work has been done to prepare the framework for PESCO, it is time for the Member States to do the very last step and to notify their readiness to take part in the permanent structured cooperation. I will never stop repeating that, yes, we know well that some Member States are more ready, more capable of joining PESCO from the very start, but this must not impede to the others to join as soon as they are ready, based on the same criteria initially set, like in all forms of enhanced cooperation. Along these lines, I will invite, on one hand, the national parliaments to debate and follow the implementation of the security and defence policy and PESCO with a view to finding space for further progress and integration. On the other hand, I will invite the European Parliament to strengthen its partnership and cooperation with the national parliaments in the area of defence and PESCO. And one final question, Mr. President Tusk. When the Council will implement the proposal of the European Commission to invite Romania and Bulgaria to join as soon as possible Schengen as full members? This is becoming a sort of Carthago for Romanians and Bulgarians. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Mr. Lunas, 1 minute, please.
Dank u wel, mevrouw de voorzitter. Mijn mailbox zit vol.
Thank you, Chair. Recently, I've been hearing a lot about Catalonia and Turkey. Last week, there was the head of the States and Government Summit. Mention was made of Turkey there. They said Erdogan could not join. Maybe that could have been made plainer. But looking at Catalonia, a lot is being said. What about political refugees, unity and the rule of law? European politicians are always the first to wag their fingers at others and lay down the law to them, but now rule of law is being threatened within the EU and is being stamped on. There are political prisoners within Europe itself, and there's no mention being made of that in the Council conclusions and in the agenda of the EP in Parliament. Likewise, Mr. Tusk just flagged this, but this is selective outrage we are seeing, and that's a shame, a great shame for the European institutions.
1 minute for Mr. Chrysogonos. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The results of the meeting of heads of states and governments last week are not a real step forward in the open issues the European Union is faced with. The results of the Council are more or less general repetitions of known policies at a time when problems are exacerbated, especially as regards migration. We need more audacity, we need to be bold and have more solidarity among the Member States. Migration flows are not a problem only for Italy and Greece, it's a European problem. We have to manage it centrally. I have to express my satisfaction. Mr. Tusk said that the Council authorized the Commission to examine the limitation of the pre-accession aid for Turkey. The Erdogan regime is far and far away from democratic principles, and we have to react appropriately. Thank you.
Madam Ferreira.
Grazie, Presidente.
Thank you, Chair. From 2006 to 2017, almost 3 million refugees, almost half of the total, disembarked in Italy, and most of them are not entitled to any form of international protection. Looking at the statements of principle of the Council, there is no firm commitment taken as to how to distribute refugees among Member States in a spirit of solidarity, particularly since some countries are erecting barriers and revolutionary propaganda is going around the Parliament, and there are filters parameters which are leaving countries in the first country of arrival. There is much made of security checks and pre-screening. There is a lack of union in the EU. The EU is wasting an opportunity to enshrine the principles of solidarity and acting pursuant to Article 80 of the treaty.
1 minute, Mr. Annemans.
Voorzitter, met de iets wat bombastische term.
President Tusk set out the important principles for the future of the European Union. This vision is attempting to preserve unity, but the new vision that we want to see now is moving against centralization and bureaucracy. That was the origin of Europe, using as a basis your own identity and respecting subsidiarity. It's Europe's diversity that is the root of its strength. That's what we should be trying to promote. Tusk's reference to unity is quite strange and outdated. There are increasing peoples who are speaking out against this. We've seen in Spain and Ireland, but if you look in Austria as well, we can see the strength of these new movements. We want to see less European Union, not more.
Thank you very much for your agenda, Mr. Tusk. Europe is built on ambition and politics, and it's only that way that we can have a secure future. 6 years after signing the Rome Treaties, we Europeans are still different, but we are equal. We've learned to live and coexist under the same laws, with the same rights, and even the same currency. We've learned to call ourselves citizens rather than enemies, to listen to one another rather than accuse one another. We've learned to build bridges rather than put up walls. Nothing seems to happen without us recognizing that we've done well. Nevertheless, we're seeing the spectre of national populism, which is poisoning everything, like in my country, Spain. Like 100 years ago, there are politicians who are able to endanger their people because of so-called sovereignty and ethnic policies. Today we're seeing new cultural segregation, new borders and new linguistic divisions, new nations being claimed. And like in '56, we had to recognize that prosperity in Europe is based on peace and security. However, we cannot have peace and security if we don't have law or the rule of law. Democracy, of course, is right if all citizens can vote. And even though institutions, however legitimate, they're not an end in themselves. They are there to serve the citizens. Democrats, we fight for the euro, for Erasmus, for Schengen, the 24 languages of this European Parliament, and the greatest social expenditure in the world. Now, since human beings have been around, no one has had the well-being that we've had in Europe in the 21st century. We have to continue with Europe, to build Europe, so that it doesn't mean that the future is just a dream that never happens. If we're not aware of the danger of national populism, we will go back to the errors of the past that we do not want to commit. The future of Europe is more EU and not more nationalism.
For 1 minute, Mr. Weidenholzer.
Dear colleagues, the recent summit won't go down in history. Once again, we've seen when it comes to major issues such as migration, things get bogged down. The 4 pages of conclusions are disappointing. It's just a list of futile attempts to do things. There's no prospect for the future and no sensitivity for what's gone on. There's no mention at all of refugees. It's quite different when it comes to issues where there are tangible results expected, such as Digital Europe. Specific steps are mentioned. A timetable is laid down, for example, fair tax on IT companies or cybersecurity. This outcome-oriented pragmatism is sound. When it comes to spectacular issues, I think we need more pragmatism and less of a tendency to waffle about actions.
Thank you. 1 minute, Mr. Belder.
Dank u wel, mevrouw de voorzitter.
Thank you, President. A couple of comments on Turkey, which was discussed at the most recent European summit. First of all, the EU wants to continue its dialogue with Turkey. I hope that the European side will defend freedom of worship for Turkish Christians, because they are facing increasing pressure, and in fact churches in Izmir have been closed. Second comment, which is actually a question. There's a contradiction in European policy in the fact that we give accession funds, pre-accession funds to Turkey, and at the same time we say that the human rights situation and the NGO situation is unsatisfactory. And gas ducts are providing funding for a gas pipe, and I'd like a response on that.
1 minute, please.
The Good Friday Agreement recognises that there are unique circumstances that require special arrangements regarding the north of Ireland. That accord essentially conferred a special status regarding the political and constitutional framework on which the 6 counties of the north operate. That agreement is the basis on which we have been building peace in Ireland. Anyone who now says that there must be no special provisions for the north of Ireland in any Brexit deal is not only ignoring the realities of the Good Friday Agreement, they are in fact trying to undermine it. It's disappointing that the British government is cherry-picking the peace agreement, but it would be worse, it would be a travesty, if EU negotiators allowed them to do so by agreeing to the removal of European legal protections for the north of Ireland. As someone from the border region, I tell Parliament today, I tell the Council, I tell the Commission, our community will not accept any return to the days of physical manifestations of the border in Ireland, knowing as we do the economic, political and social catastrophe that that would be. All of Ireland must remain in the customs union and the single market, and all of Ireland must have the protections of EU law, and the EU must stand firm on these positions.
Thank you. Mr. Rebega, 1 minute, please.
Doamnă președinte, domnilor președinți.
Madam President, Presidents, when God created the EU, he thought of giving the citizens of 3 institutions as well as knowledge, power and will. But the devil came along and said, oh, that's a little bit too much. And God replied, no, I don't agree. They've only got 2 of these qualities. The European Council has power and knowledge. However, we have will. As far as last week's work is concerned, that demonstrates it. In the digital agenda, it's true there has been progress. As far as PESCO is concerned, we've heard all the best intentions. As far as refugees are concerned, nothing. Brexit, we talk about progress, but we have also admitted that not sufficient progress has been made. As far as reform of the EU is concerned, no mention. That is the real problem. Before the session we were talking about a roadmap. That's all well and good. However, the problem is we don't have the road nor the map. And before we've decided to decide anything together, the EU and its institutions to actually create that road was simply treading water. We must surely start with a reform, however painful.
Thank you. Mr. Rangel, 2 minutes.
President, I have three messages, one for all colleagues, one for President Tusk and the other for the Commission. And I will be very sharp, very loud and very clear. To all the colleagues, I am shocked and I am ashamed when I hear in this House that there are members of this Parliament that think that there are no respect for fundamental freedoms in Catalonia. Only one person that doesn't know Spain, that doesn't know Catalonia can think that there is not a strict respect for rule of law and fundamental rights. I would like to live in a global world where the human rights are so respected as they are, even today in Catalonia. Second message, President Tusk, I have to say, I'm very worried with this idea of an extraordinary council on the composition of the European Parliament. This is a competence and a power of our Parliament that then has to be approved by the Council, it's true. But we have made a huge progress. And I, as a professor of constitutional law that teaches to his students the English Revolution, I will say, we will not give up, we will not resign, and we will define our own composition because we feel a sovereign representative of the European peoples. And the Council should be aware of this in any case. And finally, third message, I'd like to say to the European Commission that I put all my hope in the establishing of a European force of civil protection. And that should be a body like the Coast Guard that could be an embryo of the future defence framework that we have. Thank you very much.
Thank you. For 1 minute, Mr. Gualtieri. I don't think he's in the House. So I will move to our next speaker, 1.5 minutes, Mr. Sógor. Thank you.
Az 56-os magyar forradalom és szabadságharc ünnepe alkalmából.
On the occasion of the 1956 Hungarian Revolution, I would like to start by quoting Albert Camus, who said that in a lonely Europe we can only stay true to Hungary if we never betray what Hungarian fighters gave their lives for. It is not easy to live up to the memory of all these victims, but we must try, overcome our disputes, learn from our mistakes, to double our efforts of solidarity in a finally united Europe. And now to turn to the problem of Schengen. European citizens feel outraged, and rightly so, to have to go through border controls on internal borders. We understand the anxieties of various member states, but we must realize that a key achievement of the European Union is at risk constantly. European institutions practically admit that this current situation can go on indefinitely. All that people see is that anybody can cross the external borders while internal border checks are restored. If the member states are unable to guarantee security without internal border checks, then there must be something seriously wrong with the system. And I'm puzzled by the reluctance of certain member states to allow Romania and Bulgaria to join the Schengen system, while the real problems of external border control are to be found not in Romania and Bulgaria, but in countries which are already members of Schengen. Thank you.
Thank you, and we can now give the floor to Mr. Gualtieri for 1 minute, please. Mr. Gualtieri, I'm giving you the floor for 1 minute. Excuse me, to the chair. Would you like the floor now because I'm giving it to you for 1 minute? Or would you wait for the next speaker? So we'll give you time to catch your breath, and we will now give the floor to Madam Sippel for 1 minute, please.
Thank you. Flucht und Migration gehören zu den...
Migration and refugees are the major challenges of our time for Europe and elsewhere. This Parliament engaged in worrisome negotiations, and we agreed to overhaul the Dublin system, more joint responsibility, not forsaking states on the external border, but there needs to be a stance from the Council. The impression is that people are hearkening to the words of populists. The agreements with Libya, Turkey and transit countries. With regard to poverty-related migration, we need to work together with the countries of origin to see to it that they take back their citizens so that less people come to Europe, leaving their own country to seek a future. Here I concur with the Council. We need to engage in a dialogue with these countries of origin when it comes to development, trade, visas and other areas to hit upon new solutions. The Council could maybe come up with some tangible proposals. So let's be the architects of our own future and that of those who will succeed us.
Thank you, Madam. I now give the floor to Mr. Gualtieri. Third time lucky. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, apparently my group request of inversion of the speaker arrived too late, but okay, I'm here supposed to talk about Brexit, and I will do that, but before that, I would like to make a short comment about the basis of our community identified by Donald Tusk. And yes, we are a territorial community. Yes, we have a cultural identity. Yes, we are a political community. I would like also to stress and remind that we are seen in the world as one of the most civilized jurisdictions because also our social model, social market economy, but not the market society. Europe is a place where every child goes to school, every sick person has health care, every elderly has a pension, and labour rights are protected. This is a fundamental always to remind for us. On Brexit, we welcome Article 50 conclusion of the European Council, which are fully in line with our resolution. We recognise the progress and the new dynamic put in place by Florence speech of Theresa May, but also we see that we are not yet there for open the second phase. Sufficient progress has not been reached, and we look forward for the next weeks and months of negotiation in order to arrive there, to recognise fully the financial obligation, to fully safeguard the right of citizens, and to fully agree on the common principle on the Irish issue. We are at touching distance, yes, but we need also to arrive to a conclusion, and we encourage our UK counterpart to be constructive at the negotiation table. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Niedermayer, 1.5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam. I came here mostly to listen, not just to speak for 90 seconds, and these were 2 hours very well spent. And let me just remind a few words that were said in the debate. Let me start by 3 words said by our 3 presidents. These were words: values, unity and solidarity. I guess that most of us believe that this is the essence, the core of our common Europe. And we must find a way how to convince more national politicians and mostly as many people as possible that they see that the same way. How to do it? We know it's not easy. But let me borrow 2 words that were said by heads of our 2 parliamentary groups. The words are visibility and the results. And we must find a way how to reach the results that will be visible and that will allow people to understand the benefits of European Union. But at the end, let me mention also 2 words that are more difficult to understand the result for us. These are words pragmatism and unanimity, said by also chairs of our group. Concerning the pragmatism, let me say that sometimes it's a good thing, but I don't think that it's good for the sake of pragmatism, so-called pragmatism, to obey the rules, the principles and common sense. And this is, I guess, quite important. And unanimity is also a tricky word, because we must find the right balance between unanimity and unity in order to reach the visible and good results that will support our union in the minds of the people. Thank you.
Thank you. 1 minute, Mr. Fleckenstein.
Herr Präsident.
President Tusk, I wondered for hours who you were referring to when we saw the leaders' agenda you've presented. Did you mean here in the Parliament or the leaders in the Commission? And then when I found out that you mean the people who in the European train are sitting in the last carriage and have to be dragged along the whole time. Now, you're right when you say that it isn't enough to simply criticise the Council all the time, and that's why I extend a plea to us in the Parliament. We have to ensure that we also have the domestic policy discussions back home and ensure that our governments in Berlin, Budapest and elsewhere, that we can convince them that they have to come on board with us. We cannot simply rely on the fact that it is enough to take wise decisions alone here. If that happens, and I'm quite sure there'll be better possibilities within the Council. And that's why I ask you, please do not get together in February to take a decision over our heads, but instead use that special event to solve the problems that you yourself have mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you. 1.5 minutes. Mr. Kovachev.
Благодаря, госпожо председател. Уважаеми господин...
Thank you very much indeed, President. Mr. Tusk, Mr. Timmermans. Mr. Tusk, I've got some sympathy for you. I do have some sympathy for you because you often face a Hobson's choice. You have to find the right compromise, a compromise which is satisfactory for all member states. You've really got your work cut out for you there, particularly given that unanimity is required in the Council. Those countries who are more active in certain European projects, in theory, should have the possibility to take part in a dual-speed Europe. This ought to be feasible, but this will only work if there's a will to do this, because certain countries ought to take part in certain projects, such as the European Public Prosecutor. Bulgaria and Romania need and must join the Schengen area. This will bolster our shared security. Our security should certainly not be undermined, as many people think. The new Dutch government needs to take the right steps in 2018 to ensure that Bulgaria and Romania are part of the Schengen area. With regard to the Eurozone, we need to apply the same yardstick across the board. Those countries who tick all the boxes ought to be able to take part in the mechanism. Now, I refer to the ERM2 mechanism. All member states up to Denmark and the UK have expressed their will to be members of the Eurozone. Now, looking at defence, we do need to be more active. In the 1950s, we ought to have already set up a defence community. This would have obviated many of the issues being raised right now.
Mr. Corbett, 1 minute, please.
Decided, as expected, that insufficient progress had been made in the negotiations. This was a statement of the blatantly obvious. Yet when this Parliament said the same thing just 2 weeks prior to that, with most British MEPs voting in favour of Parliament's resolution, 2 Conservative MEPs were suspended by their party for daring to tell the truth. This gives us a clue as to why progress is so minimal in the negotiations: the divisions within the governing Conservative Party. Theresa May spends more time negotiating with her party than negotiating with the European Union. And some of her party actually want Brexit without a deal. They present this as a negotiating tactic. If Britain threatens to leave without a deal, the EU will give us what we want. Yet, as everybody knows that this will be hugely economically damaging to Britain, that tactic amounts, Madam President, to holding a gun to your own head and saying, "Give me what I want, or I will shoot myself." It won't work. But they don't actually want it to work. Those people want a Brexit without a deal because they want to create maximum distance between Britain and its neighbouring countries. No matter how damaging that is, no matter how costly that is what they want. Nobody should have any illusions as to where the responsibility lies. And I think that President Tusk was quite right when he said, "It's up to Britain." In his words, it's up to Britain to choose a deal, no deal, or no Brexit. You were right, President Tusk.
Thank you. Mr. Karas, 1.5 minutes.
Madam President, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to pick up where our colleague Mr. Hofstadt, Mr. Rangel and also Mr. Fleckenstein the issues they raised. The extraordinary summit that you flagged up for February, President Tusk. Now, if you are to hold an extraordinary summit on this issue, then you should call one to strengthen European democracy. We need to discuss the future of European democracy. We must strengthen the division of powers. And one problem of the division of powers is that in the Council, the governments, on the one hand, the executive, on the other hand, they're also legislative. Unanimity and intergovernmentalism weakens the national parliaments and the European Parliament. And the fact, therefore, that we need to discuss how together we want to strengthen the institutions and shoulder our democratic responsibilities. Yes, then the issue of the Africa Fund, the external borders, migration policy, all of this is connected to the fact that these are primarily national competences, but that together we have a European problem. So yes, to an extraordinary summit on the future of European democracy and a discussion about what we need to change within the Council so that the EU is able to act with all the institutions together and that decisions can actually be implemented. And let me say, we don't just need money for Africa. We also need common borders, common security, money and investment policy. We need the external Coast Guard, but we also need the competence, the money and the staff. So please listen to those concerns. Thank you.
Mr. Danti, 1 minute, please.
Grazie.
Thank you, President. Colleagues. How can we evaluate the conclusions of a European Council? It's a strategic vision, speed in decision-making, resolution in taking decisions, solidarity between member states. If these were the criteria, then I don't think we have achieved a satisfactory result. And that's without even mentioning migration, where now it's useless to express solidarity, and it seems like we're making no progress. And it has taken a very long time. The Council still hasn't been able to pass a reform of the Dublin regulation, which Parliament did last week. We're seeing initial fruits from the process launched in 2015 by the Commission. In these situations, we need solidarity, resolution, and vision. On web office providers, we welcome the efforts made by Germany, Spain, other countries. Others are working on it, and we hope to see a rapid and ambitious response at EU level.
Thank you. Madam Šuica, 1.5 minutes.
Thank you. Peace, freedom and democracy are not to be taken for granted. They are the result of our common efforts and of the common European values. Schengen, the Eurozone, 24 languages, principles of solidarity, these are all values that we want to continue enjoying. Someone mentioned Romania and Bulgaria. I want to mention Croatia, who also wish to join the Schengen area, and I hope that we will be able to do so. I must once again express my regrets when it comes to Brexit, but since this is a fact, I think we need a fair divorce and we need to honor all the financial and other commitments. Furthermore, I cannot but regret the situation in Catalonia. Mr. Tusk, following Mr. Juncker's speech on the State of the Union, following Mr. Macron's speech, we have your leader's agenda. I'm very optimistic. You have listed a number of issues, but we need realistic solutions for realistic problems that our citizens are facing, so that they can see what we're doing here, so that we can resolve issues. And the main issues they're facing are fears regarding security, immigration, but also unemployment in Europe, which is still very strong, especially in the new member states, some of them. This is why I eagerly await your discussion about the euro area, the changes to the asylum system, and the new asylum policy, and I'm also eagerly awaiting other topics such as the common European defense. I hope that we will be successful together and that you will be able to find compromise within the Council. Thank you.
Thank you. 1 minute, Mr. Mavrides.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Above and beyond the financial interests and other interests, our maximum interest is to implement the European rule of law and legality. This is the crucial reason of our existence. In the recent Council, Turkey didn't receive any damage. We're planning to cut some million from the funds given to Turkey. At the same time, we're giving many billions of euros to Turkey. So, Mr. Juncker is not here, but I think the question will be conveyed to him. Do you continue supporting the upgrading of the customs union with Turkey without Turkey having conformed to its European obligations, including the recognition of the Republic of Cyprus? This is a main question. Mr. Tusk, in the Council, with an announcement you made, you said that you heard the misgivings of the President of Cyprus for the new violations of the rights of people who are isolated by Turkey in Cyprus. And I can hear the misgivings of everybody. My question is, what do you do concerning the violation of the rule of law of the European Union in the occupied part of Cyprus?
Thank you. Madam Schlein.
President Tusk, in the Libe last Thursday, there was a broad majority behind an ambitious reform of Dublin. The Parliament is negotiating with the Council, challenging national selfishness. We want to launch a clear signal for European citizens. At least one of the three institutions is coming up with practical common solutions based on solidarity. The major hurdle we finally overcome is the country of first access, which was hypocritical. We now have a permanent mechanism for resettlement involving all member states. We are ready. The Council, where are you at? What have you managed to agree on? It's a crying shame that Dublin will not only be discussed in spring. We spent 18 months discussing the Commission proposal, but you've only tried to outsource our borders. You've not managed to make any headway on internal solidarity. President Tusk, I'll do you a favour. You said you would remind the governments who signed up to the treaties that signed up to Article 2. Remind them this also applies to Article 80, solidarity and sharing responsibilities fairly. We want to maintain European unity. You said you want to do this as well. So take on board the Parliament's proposal, because there's no unity without solidarity. Without quotas only will not bring us forward.
Thank you. Mr. Pizzula, 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Čestitam zemlji predsjedavateljici na impresivnim rezultatima u digitalizaciji, nadajući se usvajanju direktiva koje će cijeloj Europskoj uniji
Thank you very much. Well, we certainly hope that the directive will allow a digital future to be implemented effectively. I'm also pleased that we've seen a return to Schengen, a strategic objective for Croatia, and we would very much hope that it will be possible to move forward on the promise of accession, and I hope we'll be able to reduce the barriers separating us from our neighbours. And of course there's enhanced cooperation as well, which I think has to be offered to SMEs thanks to our joint programmes. It is also timely to look at the new programme for a more social Europe. And thanks to the Western Balkans Summit, we need to restart the dialogue with the support of those countries to look at the migratory crisis. Thank you.
Thank you. 1 minute now for Madam Puri. Thank you.
Thank you very much. A 3-hour discussion by EU leaders on Turkey, and the only sentence that made it to the conclusions is that the European Council held a debate on relations with Turkey. On such an important topic, it would have been good to start seeing strategic thinking on the part of our heads of state. It is clear what EU leaders do not want. No opening of accession chapters, no modernisation of the customs union, no lifting of the visa requirement for Turkish citizens, no harsh words on fundamental human rights abuses. But all these no's don't add up to a strategy on how to do an attempt to keep Turkey anchored to the EU. On the eve of the summit, another low point has been reached in Turkey with the arrest of Osman Kavala, a leading activist in building a more tolerant and open Turkey. Now, how is the EU showing its solidarity with civil society in Turkey, with millions of citizens who are going through very difficult times? Cutting back on pre-accession funding is not more than logical in the light of the current events, but a good signal would be to use that money for helping Turkey's democrats. They are the ones who deserve our fullest support. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Garcia Perez, 1 minute, please.
Thank you very much. I don't think we can deny that Europe is facing major difficulties and threats at the moment. Selfishness, the lack of solidarity, and the lack of solidarity with those from outside, those who are at the doors of Europe fleeing hunger, war, and who come up against part of Europe which doesn't understand that there are joint measures which are required to face these challenges, the challenges of migratory flows and of refugees, but also selfishness and lack of solidarity within the European Union itself, because today in Europe there are some who exploit the social divisions which have been created to throw up walls and borders, to undermine the basic principles of the European Union based in solidarity and cooperation. And with that, to face that, the only thing to be done is to defend the state of social democracy, and that's the position that the European Union and those of us who support the European Union should be in.
Thank you, colleagues. We now have the Catch the Eye list, and I give the floor immediately for 1 minute to Mr. Christoforou, please.
Thank you, Chair. Dear friend, President of the European Council, dear Mr. Tusk, we're very happy that you stress the values and principles of the European Union, which is based on these principles. But Turkey is violating these principles every day. There is a member state of the European Union, Cyprus, the Republic of Cyprus, where there are violations of our human rights, where there are threats. You've heard from our president that they even banned to those in the enclaves humanitarian help. There are every day important provocations by Turkey. We should defend our principles and our values. We cannot accept this blackmail from Cyprus and from Turkey and these threats. We should not give them more money. There should be no upgrading of the customs union. No further chapters should open if Turkey does not comply with these principles. We are very happy because you and Mr. Timmermans, who is here present, know very well that these last efforts failed for solving the Cyprus problem, failed due to Turkey, despite the efforts of the President of the Cyprus Republic.
You have to be strict with 1 minute to give as many colleagues the floor. So, Mr. Lopez Aguilar, 1 minute, please.
Thank you, Madam President. Mr. Timmermans, I've listened carefully and with considerable concern the debate on the Council conclusions, and I'm particularly concerned about migration because we are sensing a rejection of migration because it's allegedly irregular, and this kind of obsession with returning migrants. And thus we have enhanced cooperation with Libya, blindly ignoring the fact that Libya doesn't really exist as a state, and of course we're seeing a tragedy in the Mediterranean originating in Libya, and also a no smaller tragedy in the desert, all because of the trafficking of human beings. And Schengen continues to be suspended. There's no reference to refugees, or to legal ways of migration which are needed. This in line with resettlement policies and with the creation of humanitarian visas. Schengen is still suspended, sine die. This will be extended till 2020. There will not be a Europe that citizens can get behind if we don't have a free circulation of people and a social Europe. It is shining by its absence in these Council conclusions, and in 2019 citizens will vote again. Let's not forget that.
Honorable Marias.
Mr. Marias.
Presidente.
Thank you, Chair. You spoke about unity and solidarity, but there can be no solidarity if the European Union has this attitude towards Turkey. Turkey violates our airspace, our territorial waters. It threatens Greece with a casus belli. It is occupying 37% of the territory of the Republic of Cyprus. So what kind of solidarity is that? And what were the decisions at the recent summit? There should be an immediate suspension of accession negotiations and a freezing of all monies to Turkey. How do you express your solidarity towards Greece concerning the refugee flows? There should be more resettlements. The program is over, but only 1/3 of the people that were supposed to have gone there have gone to the other countries. France and Germany have implemented 1/3, others nothing. There should be more resettlements. We cannot bear any more refugees and illegal immigrants. Thank you.
Mr. Veldmans.
Dank u wel, meneer de voorzitter, voorzitter Tusk, commissaris.
Thank you very much indeed, President Tusk, Commissioner. I'm very proud to be European. Proud. But I would be even prouder, President Tusk, were we to go further in our actions. You said you wish to see swift action. Yes, that's fine, but we need to go further on all fronts. We need to bolster security of the EU, stronger external borders, and we need a European army, I believe, as regards migratory policy. We've got the Dublin reform, and here closer attention should be paid to migrant children. We're talking about some 10,000 young migrants who've disappeared in the EU or who live in deplorable conditions in camps. Something has to be done. You said quite a lot that was very fair, but I believe, colleagues, that we ought to use Brexit as a lever to reform the EU. Now, we want to have fairer rules in the Commission.
Thank you, Chair. The results of the recent summit show that the policy of the Union is still violating the declared principles of solidarity. These policies are against the interests of the people. On immigration, we are continuing to build a fortress Europe. There are more returns and more military operations. Instead of giving practical support, concrete support to the first-line states, we insist on this unacceptable agreement which rewards Turkey with billions. Instead of helping our member states, we want to make them frontier guards. Instead of having investments to have growth in the real economy for social policies against poverty and for more jobs, we ask for acceleration, the procedures for more militarization of the Union, for more money to the defense industry, and for more money for the defense fund. These proposals will not help the peoples, but they will create new wars with disastrous consequences for the peoples of Europe. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Once again, the European Summit discussed the serious issues that the EU is facing, but it did not have a realistic solution to them. And that's the reason why there's no progress on these issues. No progress on negotiations of Brexit, on the immigration issue. The only sad result is that Greece has become a concentration camp for poor people who thought they've reached the promised land. But they have to live under unbearable conditions because Greece is destroyed economically and cannot help them. Turkey continues its provocations. It sends new waves of illegal immigrants to Greece. It does not recognize the Republic of Cyprus. But still, the European Union does not have the courage to slam the door to it and stop its funding. Further, we are living in a situation of economic crisis with more than 120 million people below the threshold of poverty. We propose more military expenses in order to face the cybersecurity crisis. This is ridiculous to anybody who knows about defense and anybody who doesn't. Thank you.
Thank you, President. Ladies and gentlemen, the European political community of different nations and cultures of Europe presupposes the understanding of each other and responsibility towards each other, and it aims to preserve cultural differences and the cultural identity of Europe, and it's up to us to preserve this carefully for the future generations. The efforts concerning external border controls and reduction of illegal flows through the Mediterranean route need to be strengthened, and they need to be shaped into a long-term vision. For that, we need to strengthen our cooperation with the countries of origin and transit. The common asylum system needs to be put in order, and also the digital future of Europe needs to become more than just a digital single market. Europe needs to get ready for the challenges of the digital technology. We need to abolish all barriers that our citizens and digital enterprises and startups are facing. Only this way can we, to the maximum possibility, exploit all the potential offered by the digital development. Thank you.
Mulțumesc, domnule președinte. Domnule Tusk, sunt bucuroasă să aud.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Tusk, it's a pleasure to hear you speak out in favour of unity, that you want just one European Union, not two, three or more. But ultimately the ball is in your courts. We've heard clear statements here to the effect that you want just one European Union acting together. And I believe that under these circumstances, Romania and Bulgaria can join Schengen. And Parliament has voted in favour of this. Now, words have to be backed by deeds. You say, well, fair enough, let's do that. If you don't want a divided Europe, you want a single Europe, we need to work together and show social cohesion. We've got to defend the EU's territory. It's got to be a single space. So, President Tusk, I think it's high time for us to realise that these countries are being discriminated against. And they are amongst the most pro-European countries in the EU. And let's respect these citizens in these countries. And let's fight against Euroscepticism by deeds. So, Mr. Tusk, it's essential that in Council you show unity too, that you don't come here to lecture us about unity and how to deal with challenges. Yes, Parliament will decide. And I do agree, if a member state leaves, that we've got to reduce the number of MEPs.
Gracias, President. Thank you, President. As Mr. Verhofstadt has said, the time has come for truth, and we need to look at different forms of political organisation if we believe that Europe is everyone's home and house. I don't think you can ward off dangers through wielding bayonets, and we need to look at identity, nationhood, sovereignty, citizens' participation, and that has to flow in both directions, up and down. And we want to see an end to social dumping, and we need to organise proper reception of refugees. We need to get our act together vis-à-vis Brexit and in relation to issues such as Catalonia. And do we want some kind of military operation on European soil because it's authorised by the Spanish Constitution? These kinds of questions need to be examined. I believe you need to come up with responses to that. Thank you.
Mr. Ferreira. Thank you, Mr. President. The cynicism of what we hear cannot conceal what this so-called pragmatic approach to migration is. The situation of migrants that are trying to come to Europe. They're expelled in a way that ignores international legality and shows how deep the European Union's real commitment to human rights is. Complicity with the brutal aggression that they suffer on the borders of the European Union and blackmail of European countries. Either they do the dirty work of getting rid of the people who are trying to flee misery, or the EU does it instead. As for the monetary union, the strategy remains the same. Basically, there's a carrot and a hidden stick. There's no carrot, really. The banking union, that's fallen by the wayside, or there's this European Monetary Fund. But all that's happening is more and more concentration of power, a usurpation of sovereignty. And for one last word about the forest fires in Portugal. Yes, we need solidarity, but the solidarity is additionality, not just rejigging or reprogramming EU funds. Thank you.
La parola ora.
Now I'll give the floor to the first Vice President of the European Commission, Mr. Timmermans.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think what our citizens expect of us is that we provide European answers where European answers are necessary, that we provide the answers that will allow them to regain control of their destinies individually and collectively, that we provide the answers for issues that are manifestly beyond the control of individual member states. That is our mission. If we are to be successful in our mission, we need to act collectively, the three institutions represented here today. If we are successful in providing answers that work for our citizens, Europe will be rewarded for it. If we are not successful in providing these answers, we will all share the blame. And the blame game here is saying Parliament did the right thing, Commission did the right thing, or Commission failed, Parliament failed, Council failed. For our citizens, they don't distinguish between our institutions. They will say that Europe has failed. So in that sense, we're in this together. Two of the institutions now represented here today only have limited time left before the next elections and before the next Commission will come in. So I think we need to make the best use possible of that limited time left. That is why I will now, in a moment, go to the College meeting to decide on the Commission work programme for next year and then present this Commission work programme here in Parliament this afternoon. Because I think the work programme will contain the concrete steps that will allow us to deliver on the promises we are making to our citizens. And it will allow us to use the 18 months that we have left in our mandates to effectively show that Europe can come up with answers when it is called to do so. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Thank you. Now I'll give the floor to Donald Tusk, the President of the European Council.
Grazie, Presidente. I just would like to clarify a few misunderstandings. The leaders' agenda is not an alternative version for the State of the Union address. It is a plan on how to organize the works of the European Council in the next 2 years. The leaders' agenda is not about changing the community method. It is an attempt to speed up decision processes within the framework of binding rules, with respect for the competences of all institutions, which also means the respect for the competences of the European Council. According to the treaty, when it comes to the composition of the European Parliament, we must work out a common solution, this House and the European Council. It is not our pleasure or ambition, it is our formal obligation. And I am the last one who would like to violate the treaty and our rules. And by the way, the composition of the European Parliament is not going to be the only topic of the Extraordinary European Council in February. We will also deal with the MFF. Personally, I consider the MFF to be an even more important part of our meeting in February. As for the Spitzenkandidaten, it was not the European Council That was the weak link in 2014. Jean-Claude Juncker was elected with 26 votes against 2 votes in the European Council, while in the Parliament he got 422 votes out of 729 votes. So it's easy to imagine a situation that it will be more difficult for the winning Spitzenkandidat to win sufficient support in the new European Parliament than in the European Council. Thank you.
Thank you very much to the President of the Council. The session is now suspended for 5 minutes. Thank you.